Hey guys, welcome. This is our first webinar in the series with Microsoft, showcasing you what we're doing to date on the Azure platform. So let's get started. I have with me Greg on the line. So before we get started, here are our coordinates on the internet. Our YouTube channel, SlideShare, will make the slides available after the webinar on the SlideShare. But most importantly, community. We will be taking a lot of questions, answering a lot of questions, posting a lot of updates on community. So do check out community.apogee.com. So with that, let's get started. I'm Sandeep. I am a solution architect working with channels and partners. I'm with Apigee for 8 years now. Been there, seen a lot of the progress in terms of API ecosystems, Apigee in particular. So with me, I have Greg. Greg, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Greg Oliver. I'm a technical evangelist with Microsoft. I've been in this role on the Azure ISV team since late 2010. Most of the time I've been working with software companies like yourselves who would like to migrate solutions to the Azure platform. The role is involved in many different things, but mostly how to architect solutions that take best advantage of the features of the Azure platform. And this year, one of the partners that I've been paired with is Apogee. It's been a great journey so far, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work with them going forward.
Awesome. And I should mention it's been a great journey for the last couple of months working with Greg and team. Very impressed with Azure and the way they built out the artifacts. Helped us really well to get on the marketplace quickly. So we have an agenda for today. We'll start with like the Azure ecosystem and what people are doing on Azure today to expose APIs, to write API workloads. And then we'll spend some time on what we have done from Apogee standpoint to help the ecosystem to be on the marketplace. And we also have a demo, a quick demo, I would say, at the end, towards the end. But we'll keep it free flowing. If you have any questions down the line, you will not be able to speak, but you can post your questions on the chat window. We will monitor the questions and we'll take them along the way. And we'll also leave maybe last 5 minutes towards the end to take any specific questions on the topic. Right. So Greg, over to you on the first part on what your customers are doing on Azure from API workload standpoint.
Sure thing. Thanks. So I wanted to talk for a few minutes about the various ways that you can host your own APIs on Azure. Azure itself has got lots and lots of APIs. If you were to go to your favorite search engine and look for Azure REST API, you would find that there are just hundreds of APIs available to incorporate into your solutions. But most of those are primarily infrastructure level type APIs. So if your solution involves potentially managing part of a customer's environment on Azure, then you could leverage those APIs to do that. But I'll focus a little more time on how you would build and deploy your own APIs to the Azure platform. There are some obvious things that you can do with using, publishing your solution to a VM or to a collection of load balanced VMs, either Linux or Windows. I don't know how many of you on the call actually are unaware that we host several different Linux distros on the Azure platform, and in fact, they comprise quite a large percentage of all of the virtual machines, running on Azure. And so feel free to kick the tires there. But if you like using Apache for running your Java or PHP workloads, if you like using Windows with .NET and IIS to run your API workloads, all of these things are possible using just plain old, virtual machines. There's lots of options for, building environments around those VMs. There's lots of options for access control, for network monitoring and scrubbing. So it's quite a deep and rich environment around those. There are several what we call platform services available on the platform, where we have basically abstracted away some of the typical things that a developer would have to do if he was using a plain VM. So for example, if you just want to publish a web API, then you might build a VM and build the IIS environment around it and do all of that tweaking and tuning, or you could use what used to be called Azure Websites, now known as Azure Web Apps, where a lot of that management overhead is abstracted away. And on the next slide, I'll go into a couple more details about the various types of platform services where you can build your application, but as part of that application, of course, there are APIs, and you would want to manage those APIs in some way. Now, one set of APIs that I wanted to call out in particular is the cognitive services. You may have watched our build presentations from a month and a half or two ago. It's build.microsoft.com if you're interested. Cognitive services are things like speech recognition and emotion recognition, facial recognition, things like that. And so I got a slide with some of those details as well. And obviously those are APIs that you may want to include in your overall solution, and so you may want to bring under the management umbrella of the Apogee systems. So let me just push on to the next slide. And so here's that list of various types of app services that you can build on the Azure platform, where we're actually offering some additional platform capabilities for the particular solution area. Web app is what we used to call Azure Websites. It's still azurewebsites.net if you look at the address in the address bar of your browser. There's lots of different dials and knobs that you can turn, lots of different language options, authentication options, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of the generic platform offering for web systems, web services, web APIs. But then the other four on the page give you additional platform services. So for example, a function app lets you write a simple or complex function and manage it through the app services facilities. And these functions respond to events. So there's lots of different types of events. You drop a new file into blob storage, or a new message hits your queue. There's lots of events that can be triggered that you can then cause these functions to be invoked. Mobile apps, that's clearly targeted at writing mobile applications for the various types of devices, Apple, Android, and believe it or not, Windows Mobile. And so we abstract away a lot of the typical operations that a mobile application needs to access on the back end. And in addition, there's API opportunities there as well. And those APIs you may want to manage. Logic apps are the sorts of apps that you may have previously thought of in context of BizTalk, which is a workflow or a computational pipeline type system. Logic apps gives you simplistic abilities for designing and producing your workflows, and all the way down to the complex. So BizTalk-like features and functions are also available through Logic apps. And again, APIs are involved in all of these things. And then an API app is kind of your if you have an existing API and you want to bring it to the platform, you want really nice Swagger integration. You want to use some of the features of other apps inside your app services kind of environment. Then it's very easy from these API apps to kind of branch out into some of your other properties in that environment. Now, I mentioned cognitive services earlier. It is in preview. There are this set of APIs available for you to take advantage of. I mention it here not because you can actually put your own APIs into these environments. These are Microsoft hosted and operated APIs. But again, you may want to put them under the umbrella of your overall solution. And so that just wanted to highlight these things that they're pretty interesting. They got a lot of attention at Build, and a lot of people are real excited about them. And one more that I wanted to mention that I don't have a slide for, and that is the new conversations as a service, as our CEO Satya Nadella calls it. Basically, you can build bots that are designed to have conversations around a particular topic, like reserving a hotel room or renting a car, and you have a conversational style of interaction with the customer. And of course, all of this is done through APIs. And so with that, I will hand it back to Sandeep.
Brilliant. So with naturally, right, with so many APIs, why would you not want Apigee to manage them, right? So that's, in fact, a lot of our customers are using Azure today to host some of their workloads in multiple ways that Greg just mentioned. And we are also seeing a lot of interest from Azure customer base to have Apigee manage those APIs, and that's the update that we wanted to give you today, a quick preview. Right, so in fact, before even I start, one thing I should mention is Apigee today comes in two form factors. We have a cloud offering, and we have an on-premise, the private cloud offering, where we give you the software bits and you host it in your private cloud. And that's an option that's available today for any customers. Some of our customers today are using that to basically install Apigee on Azure. But we wanted to make that experience a lot more seamless and nicer, and that's the effort that we wanted to share with you today. Right. So before I get there, like I said, with all the APIs, especially in hybrid scenarios where you have some workloads on Azure, some workloads on premise deployments, and maybe some coming from SaaS providers like Salesforce. The whole idea of having a platform to secure, scale, manage these APIs becomes very relevant, and especially in the context of different experiences that enterprises want to build and different channels that they want to expose these assets to, right? And that's where Apigee comes in. So that's the quick intro to Apigee. I would say, that's what Apigee is doing in the context of what we will be talking today. And it's the same. We're talking about the Apigee Edge product, our core offering. This is the architecture slide that talks about the functionality of the product that does proxying your APIs, providing you analytics, taking care of your onboarding capabilities, so on and so forth. Right? So I'll not be spending a lot of time talking about Edge because most of you are already familiar with the platform, and we have a lot of content available online for you to get up to speed, and we can do follow-up webinars on that. Right? But today I wanted to spend time mostly on what's available today from Azure Marketplace standpoint. So we are on Marketplace today, right? So we have Apigee VM that Azure customers can launch from Azure Marketplace, and we are looking at hosting or providing multiple configuration options. These are pretty standard private cloud configurations that we see our customers using today, right? But what we have done is tailored them to the Azure ecosystem, kind of put them in t-shirt sizes. So the extra small that you see there is a one node deployment where all the functionality of Apigee is in one single box. it works well if you want to try Apigee from a functional standpoint. Right, so want to understand the functionality, you just use that, everything is launched on one single node, you can try the Apigee functionality. The medium one is basically the 5-node configuration where we have redundancy, high availability for all the critical components, but the data nodes and the runtime are hosted on on shared capacity. It works well for non-production deployments. If you have a dev QA stage, maybe you could use that. And the large is typically what we recommend customers in production. It's a 9-node deployment. Like I said, it's our standard private cloud deployment configurations put on the Azure marketplace. Right, but one big thing that happens when you launch Apogee from the marketplace is all the provisioning happens automatically, all the installation configurations happen automatically, and you get a clustered deployment of Apogee ready to use in maybe 20-30 minutes. Right, so that's a big step. And from a licensing standpoint, it's no different. It's bring your own license model on the Azure marketplace. So essentially, you are using your existing license from Apogee. So if you already have a license, you would use that in the marketplace offer. If you do not have one, you would contact Apogee sales to get an eval license for you to try. Right, and like I said, the support for this would be pretty standard because what we are essentially doing is taking our private cloud bits and deploying it on the marketplace. So you should expect the same level of community support or the support portal support. And one thing to mention is a huge partner ecosystem of Apigee certified trained people. You can leverage to manage even like your production deployments on Azure. So it's pretty comprehensive offer, I would say, solution that you can use in production. For testing for non-production today, and that's the offer. Right, so that's what we have on the marketplace. And like I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on the advantages, really, on what we have seen, and especially the reason why we're doing it, the demand from our customers and Azure customers on why this, right? So why Apigee on Azure in the marketplace. Right, so one definitive advantage, which is obvious, is with Apigee on Azure, we will be co-located with all the API workloads that Greg talked about. Right, so we will, you will see better latencies. Like your firewalls can be managed better. Essentially, you are sitting next to your API workloads, giving you a lot of flexibility, a lot of control in terms of how your APIs are managed. And it's not just specific to like Azure alone. Like one of the great things about people using Azure is Azure has a pretty good connectivity between the private cloud or the Azure cloud and your on-prem deployments. So that's something I wanted Greg to touch upon. So Greg, do you want to talk about the express routes and the on-prem?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So the connectivity options between your premises or your customer's premises, if you happen to be a software vendor, and that customer's Azure assets, there's a couple of different ways to go about it. One is VPN. In a nutshell, there's a VPN gateway up on the Azure side of things that connects up to your customer's virtual network and subnets, and then there's a VPN device on premises. You build a connection between them. You configure which subnets on the premises side are actually exposed to that connection, and then the subnets on-prem and the subnets in Azure become one network. So obviously you have to pick your subnets correctly so they don't collide with the numbering schemes. ExpressRoute is oh, I'm sorry, one more thing about the VPN. That's obviously going across the internet. So you have all of that type of latency and performance concerns to be thinking about. Now, if you have MPLS with your organization, MPLS is telephone company provided dedicated connectivity services. We have ExpressRoute is the name of the service on the Azure side. if you have relationships with companies like AT&T, there's literally a list of about 50 different companies around the world that provide express route connectivity between your premises and Azure. So depending on where you're located and who you have your existing relationships with, that's where you would start that conversation. And then once you've got the circuit in place, creating an express route link is a pretty simple matter through the Azure portal. And then, of course, once those channels are in place, you've got secure connectivity between your Azure assets and your on-prem assets. And so then you could start to manage any APIs with an Apigee Edge solution installed in your Azure subscription and managing APIs that are in your green zone on your premises through that secure connectivity. Back to you.
In fact, that's one of the things that a lot of our customers are doing today from a lift and shift standpoint. With Apogee being the unified API exposure layer, you, for one, will be able to expose all your APIs from on-prem as well as from your Azure cloud and other clouds if you're having hybrid deployment. And gradually, you have the flexibility to basically move things around, lift your existing on-prem deployments and shift them to the cloud. But with Apogee managing all of them, you have one visibility around who is affected if they are, and to create, at least keep the API layer unified when you do all this, right? So that's like a definitive advantage that people are seeing, and that's one of the reasons why there is a huge demand for Apigee on Azure. And in fact, in addition to these two, like basically co-locating with your API workloads and having a unified exposure layer, one thing that Azure is big on is directory, right? So in fact, Active Directory is one of the things, but there are a lot of other such systems that people would want to leverage. For example, if you want to use Active Directory to manage your users or even tokens in some cases, with Apigee on Azure, it makes it very easy for you to do some of those, right? And the other thing that we heard from customers is the data transfers. The data ingress to clouds is pretty straightforward. It's not very expensive, but data egress is very expensive. That's one thing, like with Apigee on Azure, you should be able to pull out data from Apigee, especially the analytics data, because like Apigee being your API platform, you're getting a lot of intelligence around who is using your APIs, which partner is consuming, which app is becoming more successful. So all of the data, not just from an API standpoint, it's also relevant for your big data analysis. So pulling in data from, let's say, Apigee's analytics API and pushing them to your HD Insights, for example, could be less expensive if we are on the same, like if we are on the Azure cloud platform, right? So, and again, these are specific things that we've seen people asking. But I'm very sure that as the product is used, as the solution in Azure is used more and more, we'll start seeing additional use cases, and like we are very open to support all of those. So in fact, a large part of what I would like to do is get feedback. If you are using Azure today, what would you like to see Apigee do to help you from an Azure ecosystem standpoint? And we'll act on that. I can guarantee you that. Right. So with that, I wanted to like basically show you a quick demo of how Apigee would look on the marketplace. So let me hit my screen share. And you should be able to see my Chrome window with I'm on the Azure Marketplace. So if you are already familiar with Azure, then this is a screen that you probably use every day, this Azure portal. If you are not, then if you sign up for Azure free subscription, this is the place where you will be able to use the Azure trial, right? So but I wanted to show you the marketplace offer, right? So so if you go to marketplace and search for Apigee today, you should see Apigee listed. So in fact, there are a couple of things, and over the course we kind of clean it up and just keep one offer. But the way it is today, you see a private cloud virtual machine with the version number. So that if you launch that, that'll launch a single node of Apigee with Apigee binaries on it. So you'll still have to go to or log into that instance and use our private cloud documentation to install Apigee. Right. So that's in production today. But the one I wanted to walk you through is what in Azure terms we call a solution template. So this is the way you would basically deploy a cluster deployment, like a clustered setup. So there is some text telling you what the offer is. And by the way, this is right now in stage. We expect this to be in production in a week to 10 days. So if you want to try this before that, I'll talk about how you can do that. But so the idea is you will go to marketplace, select Apigee Edge, and then you will see a wizard that will ask you certain basic configurations. For example, in this case, the cluster name of where Apigee should be deployed, and then the credentials. I'll basically use my public private key combination. And today that's the one that we're supporting, because we see that in production almost all our customers are using the private public key combination to secure the VMs, and not many are using passwords. So that's those are the configurations. After you give the basic level, basic details like this, the second level of details will be specific to Apigee. So this is where you see that there is a drop down of how we want to deploy Apigee. Like I said, extra small will deploy it on one single node, all the components on one node. Medium will launch 5 different nodes and will give you 2 runtime proxies for redundancy behind a load balancer. And 3-node Cassandra cluster for key management and management on one of the boxes. So the large one will kind of scale them out. Of course, analytics, which I forgot to mention, the large deployment will scale things out. It will deploy it on a 9-node cluster. Right. So now, basically, you would give your admin credentials. So once Apigee is launched, you will be able to log in with this admin email and password. So the other configurations are the license file. Like I said, you will, if you already are an Apigee customer, you would be able to get it from your FTP site, the Apigee license that you're using today. And if you want to try Apigee, we'll give you the links in the slides later on also. But you should be able to contact sales to get an eval copy, eval license to try this out. And since we are doing a cluster deployment, we also are taking the private key, because internally we are using Ansible Ansible scripting to run this cluster deployment. So it has to log into all the other 8 nodes in case of large, or all the other 4 nodes. So we'll take the private key. But these are pretty much the configurations you need. Pretty simple 4 or 5 configurations, and you're ready. Right. So now, if I run this, this will take, I kind of tested this a lot of times. The way I timed it, it takes around 20 to 25 minutes. Small would take much lesser time, maybe 20 minutes. The medium and large would take you around 25 minutes to launch. And once, and of course, I'm not going to wait for 20 minutes for you to show that. I already launched a cluster beforehand. And this is how you would see Apigee. If you're already familiar with Azure, you will see a resource group that we create, and within the resource group, you will see all the different nodes that are deployed. Right, and if there are some issues, you should be able to see them from the logs. But if there are no issues, like you see here, you'll see Apigee's management UI as one of the outputs, and you should be able to just copy that and see Apigee running installed, and you should be able to log in and use that. Right, so that's the marketplace experience. Very different from how I mean, it's a very improved experience, I would say, from deploying a private cloud deployment yourself on a 5-node or a 9-node cluster. Right, so before I show you the Apigee, the demo of the Apigee product itself, I wanted to touch upon a couple of other things that I've done on the Azure ecosystem. I've been trying out functions, for example. For building this demo, I wanted to create a function and proxy that to Apigee and show you how that experience would look like. So if you are already using functions, this is something that will be very familiar for you. But if not, functions is like Greg mentioned, a very a nice little way of pulling in your API, basically getting in compute and scaling it for the cloud scale, right? So like you see, I have a couple of functions. The idea of function is pretty straightforward. There is a trigger. So the trigger tells you when to act. For example, in my case, I have an HTTP trigger. So whenever a HTTP request comes in, I'll execute this particular node code. That's the second part, which is the compute. And then there is an output part. Like if you want to send the data to somewhere else, like a blob storage or something, then you would be able to configure that, right? So. And again, functions is one way of how you would write an API workload on Azure, but there are multiple other ways that Greg talked about, and we'll make the slides available for you to try some of them later on, right? But very quickly, what I wanted to show you is my function that I've written. It's a simple hello world function. So to show you this in Apigee, I wanted to show a couple of things. One, like the fact that whatever function I wrote, it has a specific format, right? For example, each function will take a code. So as I show you the demo, what I have done is I wanted to hide this code aspect, because when I expose this, let's say, this API to my partners, this code is probably internal detail to me. I would rather want to give an API key-based security to my developers, right? So that's one thing I've done. And now this, as you see, this function takes a parameter called name, and if that is not there, you'd see that it complies, right? And in my case, when I proxy this to Apigee, I don't want this to comply if there is if this query parameter is not present, because I want to keep it optional. So if the query parameter is absent, I am replacing that with world. So if somebody sends an API call to Apigee, I'll just say hello world. So wanted to show you how you will be able to create on top of what Azure provides, a couple of nice things that you can do with Apigee beyond the other big values that we provide in terms of analytics, developer onboarding, so on and so forth. Right. So with that, I wanted to switch back to my Apigee endpoint. So like I said, this is the one that I launched a couple of hours ago to load some of my demo assets because I'm doing a webinar. I don't want to show blank screens. But if you are launching this from the marketplace, you will be able to do you'll get exact similar experience. You'll be able to log in. You will see that we will create one organization for you with 2 environments, right? So now on top of that, you will be able to add APIs. It's again, since this is Azure Marketplace webinar, I don't want to spend a lot of time demoing Apigee itself. Because the assumption is most of you are familiar with Apigee functionality at some level, right? So, but like you see, from Azure standpoint, one definitive value that we add is API analytics, right? So now you should be able to see, for example, on my same functions proxy, I can look at which developers are sending traffic, for example, right? So this is something that which developer apps are sending traffic. So especially if you are an Azure developer writing this compute code, you don't want to be bothered with how people are using this API, how this API onboarding experience has been for the developers, for example, right? At the same time, you want the visibility in terms of who is using. For example, if you own this Azure function, you probably know that all of the traffic is coming from one IP address. Maybe good, maybe not good. You will know as the owner of this function. Right, so that's and of course, the value of Apigee really comes in when you're using more than one of these to expose APIs or to write API workloads. Sometimes you're using functions, sometimes you're using logic apps, and sometimes you're just proxying your on-premise APIs through the Apigee on Azure. Right. So again, going back to my hello this API. So this is how this API would look like for me. This is what I would give to my developers. So if I give like you see, this is now protected using API key and not the same code-based authentication that the function is allowing you to do, right? So now I can give my API key, and as you see here, if I give the name, it's proxied as is. But if I don't give this name, you'll see hello world, because within Apigee I have policies that are taking care of the required translations or required security, so on and so forth. And in fact, I also have an analytics policy that is logging which name is being requested. So as an API owner, I can, for example, look at analytics and say, who are my developers saying hello to most, for example, right? So it's a simple demo, but it will be more realistic when you use production workloads. Right, so that's a quick demo of what I wanted to show you. But again, the most important point I wanted to emphasize is it's the same Apigee Edge offering, right? So for example, things like developer onboarding, or having a developer portal with smart docs, or approving revoking keys, or for example things like monetization. They're all there. So it's exact same product, right? So the big value for an Azure customer is the fact that they're able to manage all the APIs across the Azure workloads and across their on-prem workloads and the other clouds, for example, if you're doing hybrid cloud, and be able to onboard your developers, be able to onboard your channels, and look at analytics across your usage. Right, so I need to stop the screen share. That's the demo that I wanted to show you. I would encourage all of you to try this out, because we spend a lot of time building it for you. And like I said, we are open to feedback. We would like to see what you want to do with it, and build those things into the product, or into the the marketplace offer as we go. Right. So from here, where do we go? Right. So like I said, this whatever I showed you, the wizard, that's in stage. You should expect to see it in production in a week to 10 days, and we will update you as it becomes available. And the best place to get updates, of course, is our community. So we will post the updates as they become available on community, letting you know when it goes to production. But even before that, if you want to try this everything is on Git. So all the work that I've been doing on this marketplace offer is actually on Git. So in fact, let me again do the screen share and show you real quick on how that Git offer, or how that GitHub would look. So this link will be available in the speaker notes on that slide. So this is all the work that we've been doing to make Apigee available in the marketplace. So you will see a small button here, deploy to Apigee. So if you click on this, you will see a very similar, not very similar, it's a slightly different wizard, but the inputs are exactly the same. It will take the same license file, private key, public key, username, passwords. Right. So this is how it would look. All of the inputs will be in one big list. But in the marketplace, you will see different wizards, basic configurations, Apigee setup configurations, but the inputs are exactly the same, right? And if you are really into Azure, building a lot of the solution templates yourself, there is a lot of stuff here with respect to how we are launching load balancers, how we are launching nodes. Feel free to read that, familiarize yourself with what we're doing. But this is the exact same code that will go to production in a week on the marketplace in the demo that I've shown you. Right. So coming back to it. Very quickly, if you want to try it in Azure Marketplace, it will be available, the t-shirt sizes, in a week to 10 days. If you want to try it today, it's on Git. The Git link is on the speaker notes. So with that, I would encourage you to get hands-on. It's pretty easy to get an Azure free subscription. Go to portal.azure.com. Again, the link will be in the speaker notes. Sign up, and you should, I think, get a 30-day trial. Is that right, Greg?
I'm sorry, I was responding to a question. What was the question you just asked me?
So for the Azure free subscription with free trial on Azure, is that a 30-day eval that you get, or?
Yeah. You just go to azure.com, and there's a button in the upper right-hand corner that says, get your free trial here. You do have to use a credit card. No charges will go against that credit card unless you unlock that. But it's used as a primary identifier to control fraud. We've had problems with that in the past.
All right. So for Apogee, you contact Apogee sales to get the license file. With those two, you should be able to try this on. So there are a few questions on the chat window. I think we answered most of them. So
yeah, I answered some, but you should read the answers I gave and add any color, from your perspective.
Sure. So I think one question we had is on the monitoring. So yeah, of course, my experience of Azure, there are a lot of audit logs that will help you monitor what's going on, especially when you're installing Apigee using this solution template. Again, Apigee has a lot of inbuilt monitoring. Like I've shown you in the demo, you can look at the operational logs on the API side. So that's one question, centralized monitoring. In fact, one thing we would like to do or look at in the future is see how we can integrate Apigee's own logs with some of Azure's logging systems. So in fact, I'm hearing that from a few prospects already. So that might be a good thing for us to start looking at. So there's another question on the Q&A. So this is about Azure's API management. That's you're right. So Azure has an API management, and Apigee will be very similar, or not, will be competitive to that. But the way I look at things, again, Greg can add more perspective to that. People who are using Azure today are mostly using Azure for three big things: one, directory; two, data; three, compute. They are looking at Apigee to manage the APIs, and in fact, that's what we're hearing on the field, and that's the whole effort about. And I don't think we'll be doing any competitive analysis on how Apigee is better than Azure's API management. We would like you to try and solve real problems with Apigee in the Azure ecosystem. Right. So that's on that. And again, today there are a lot of our customers who are using Azure to write API workloads and using Apigee to manage. Apigee has pretty strong analytics scale, the developer portal, a lot of things tested for the industrial, usage. In fact, today we do a lot of API volume on our platform. For example, we do 1.5 billion transactions a day, and there's a lot of learning that we took from all of that, and that becomes available to you on Azure with Apigee. And I think that's the biggest value that we would want to provide.
So from Microsoft's perspective, we are in a co-opetition relationship with quite a number of software companies. I guess the most visible is the fact that we're in relationships with companies like Red Hat and all the other Linux distros. So co-opetition is a very natural motion for us, and we welcome customers using whichever tools best fit their needs. So come one, come all.
Awesome. So we'll wrap this webinar today, and like I said, one place you want to be always on is community.apigee.com. I'll take a lot of questions on what you would like to see, and we'll act on them, and we'll also post a lot of updates on our progress in this front. So stay tuned, and thanks a lot for joining us. Have a good day.